All right, we're back. Fireside chat, Relational AI. We've got John Macintyre, who is the VP of Product Management here, and we're going to talk about some very, very interesting topics. But off the top, off the jump, there's a big transition that folks are talking about, which is this notion of moving from what effectively is it's called an application-centric architecture into a data-centric architecture, which ties to AI agents and all sorts of exciting, fun stuff. But we're with a pro, and this pro is going to help us understand it in a way that doesn't require necessarily an engineering degree. So, John, without further delay, no pressure. But I want to start with that one question we were talking about before, we got on air here, which is, what do you think the fundamental challenges are that organizations face when they're trying to derive value from their data assets today, and what role does a knowledge graph play in addressing some of these challenges?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's funny. I think so. I've worked in the space of data and analytics for quite a while now, and in AI, and it's interesting how the landscape has changed dramatically. However, many of sort of the fundamental problems remain the same, and sort of like all of these organizations, or many organizations, just struggle to make sense of their data, and they struggle with data quality issues. They struggle with reuse of data, composability of data, and really sort of being able to capture and understand the essence of what's actually in their data. And I think, if you think about knowledge graphs and sort of how they apply to that space and how they can be used in that context, if you look at a typical, we'll call it the data clouds that are emerging, and people are building data lakes and lake houses and data clouds, and this is really sort of becoming the place where you build that next generation of application, or you build that new decision system, and you sort of mobilize AI. But the problem is, I've got 10,000 tables. I have no idea what's in these tables. And I have to clean up all of that data. And that used to be the problem, like when we were trying to do BI as an industry. It's still the problem. And now that we're trying to apply AI and new techniques and new reasoning engines over top of this data. And so really where we see knowledge graphs coming into play is they help organizations capture the essence of their business. So if you look at those tens of thousands of tables, hundreds of thousands of tables, often there's maybe 100 concepts in a business that really matter, that really sort of give you that sort of essential structure of the business, how to represent the business, the relationships in the business. And so knowledge graphs allow you to do that. They allow you to effectively lift your data into sort of this semantically rich and semantically useful representation of that maps closer to your business. So you get these entities and relationships that represent your business, but it's all grounded in your actual high value business data. And so it essentially makes it more usable in that context. You get this distillation of sort of the essence of your data. And I think that's what we're starting to see now, is it's becoming sort of a critical piece in data infrastructure, that people are using this more and more to build new types of applications. I know you talked about sort of application centricity and data centricity, but this starts to be the foundation that creates data centricity in terms of how you build apps, how you apply your data to AI. And so that's really how I think about it, and how I see it happening across some of the customers we work with.
Nailed it, right? And let me double click on something there just for the audience as well. So is it safe to say that a knowledge graph, more or less can help you see things and relationships within data sets that you might not, otherwise have been able to see or not easily see? But you also, I think what you touched on there with the logic and the concepts is fascinating, right? So for non-technical folks that are, listening and watching this, it's like you and I could talk about a business, say in the telecom space or the finance space or whatever. And as human beings, we can talk about it and have a nice, easy conversation about these concepts that feel very, natural. But if you were to try to understand those concepts by looking at data sets that are inherent in systems of record, it might not be so easy
Yeah.
to translate. Is that kind of moving down
Yeah,
that
yeah.
track?
And I think it's interesting you sort of using that example of like telecom, or they're often concepts or relationships in the business that are easily, like, we often verbalize them. We often talk about, like, let's say you're in that business, you're running a telecommunication business, and your job in life, or one of your jobs in life, is as an organization, as a business, is to make sure that people who use that network, use your telecommunication, have a great experience and high satisfaction. So, what are the things that lead to that? And so, you may define concepts and relationships in your business. Like, Alec and I have spoken. We're a trusted relationship, and that's a thing. That's a thing in a business. So that means that when you call me, you text me, you're not spam. So I know how to treat that thing in the network based on some business understanding of the relationship that we have. That relationship may be defined by a set of logic. That relationship may be defined by an algorithm or some rich reasoning that we do over that data. Like, I may decide that you're a loyal customer based on, like, how you interact with products, and maybe the connectedness of you and products. I may decide that you're an influencer based on your connectedness with.
I hope so.
Of course, you're an influencer.
I hope I'm a good customer. I mean, my internet's working pretty good. Fingers crossed. Telco company's taking care of me.
I think if you think about sort of application centricity, like all of this sort of logic and understanding, historically, we put this in application stacks, right? Like, we build these in sort of systems, like, as you said, the systems that run the business, or the systems of record. We build these application stacks, and all of that understanding, all of that logic sits in application code. And so, like, as we think about, like, okay, how do we get to more of a data-centric model? Like, that is, we talk about sort of bringing some of that understanding, bringing that knowledge, and bringing it into a knowledge graph, so that you can start to operationalize that. You can start to apply it to a new set of reasoning capabilities. You can build new types of applications. And so I think that's really the opportunity that people are seeing with bringing knowledge graphs into their data infrastructure.
I love it. And I want to be cognizant of time. So 2 more questions here. So first one, you mentioned something called a semantic layer. And I would love for you to maybe unpack that a little bit further, and maybe help the audience understand. So when you introduce a knowledge graph, you've got a semantic layer, you've got some LLMs, all of a sudden you can build some pretty intelligent applications that can create a pretty world-class customer experience, which creates a lot of value. So I'd love to maybe just hear your thoughts on unpacking the semantic layer, and then maybe move a little bit down the track of, like, where's all this headed,
Yeah, and so, like, I think semantic layers, semantic models are not new, right? We've been doing this as an industry in the BI space for decades. Like, many BI stacks have introduced semantic modeling technology, and in that context, if you look at it, what is the utility of it? The utility of it is to understand things like dimensions, measures, and effectively build a dimensional model which is a sense of projection of the data. And largely the utility of that is for backwards looking analytics. You're like, okay, what did my business do? How much did I sell last month? What is the average over these different sales regions, and things like that. And it's useful, but as we think about sort of the evolution of semantic models and semantic layers, what I think we see is the need for those semantic models to get richer and richer in terms of the application logic that they can represent. And so we just talked about, like, some interesting concepts and relationships, but, like, in your typical semantic model, it's actually in a dimensional model. It's very hard to represent those things from an application logic perspective. And so how do you bring some of that understanding, and how do you bring some of that application logic into a semantic layer? And I think that's where this sort of a new class of knowledge graphs, something that we would call relational knowledge graphs, really come into play, because they can capture some of these advanced relationships and concepts that exist inside of businesses. They can also take advantage of the new reasoning capabilities that are available, not just language models, but we have at our disposal things like predictive models that can do things based on GNNs that no longer require all of this feature engineering that we've had to build and have invested in. And we've got prescriptive solvers that can tell you things like, okay, how should I optimize my supply chain given some disruption that may be happening in that supply chain? What is the impact of my business? And so how should I build an inventory plan that is actually going to minimize the impact of what might be happening in a supply chain or with a supply chain disruption. So I think these semantic layers and these semantic models are getting richer and richer. And I don't know if you want me to answer the like sort of where things are going or
you nailed it and go for it. I would love to hear it, because I think folks, there's also the interface question, which I know we had talked about the way that folks are going to be able to interact with this stuff. It's absolutely mind blowing, but please go for it. You got another 60 seconds. Bring it on.
I mean, I think why is this happening now? And you're like, okay, so yeah, we've had semantic models. Yeah, there's people that have tried to do the semantic web. Yeah, there's people who have built sort of knowledge graph platforms and things like that. I think a few things happening sort of all at once that allow us to sort of, or we're seeing sort of the tipping point where these semantic layers, or what I would call sort of these knowledge layers, these intelligent knowledge layers that are enabling a new class of applications. Like first is we brought all of our data together. So it's now possible to do cross-domain, cross-functional applications. Like you're no longer siloed in sort of the data in the domain or the system of record. And the data clouds allowed us to do that. And we now have all of these rich reasoning capabilities. We have language models, we have the reasoners that I mentioned. And so those allow us to sort of employ a much more advanced business logic than we might have done historically in I'll call traditional applications. And I think the last thing that's happening is the entire application stack is being redefined and rebuilt, because the interaction model of applications is changing so dramatically. Like you have people like Satya Nadella are saying things provocative like SaaS is dead. But I think the modality of SaaS and the modality of applications is dying and probably will be dead. But that doesn't mean applications are dead. That means that the way that we work together, how we work with agents, sort of what the world of an ensemble of users and agents working together over shared knowledge, shared understanding of a business and the context of the business, with a collective set of tools that allow them to reason over business problems and make decisions. And that is what we're moving towards, where you're no longer confined by the UI or the GUI that says like, okay, you got to click this box, you got to enter this into the text box, hit this drop down, and you'll get a set of answers. Like we're moving to a world where the interaction model is natural language, it's vision, it's speech. That's how we're going to work with agents, and that's how we're going to work across application domains and sort of experience new applications, I think. And that sort of necessitates this move towards data centricity and this emergence of a very rich semantic layer. Like I said, I don't love using the word semantic layer because there's so much baggage on that, but I mean, I think that is what's going to happen, and that is what is happening, I think, across many industries and with many companies.
I appreciate that so much, and you just absolutely nailed it. And you made the process of me creating a little lightweight kind of summary of this to promote this on LinkedIn, Twitter, we go out so easy, because I'm just going to copy and paste what you just said. Thank you so much for the conversation. And I hope we can do another one of these, because that was absolutely fascinating.